Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Who were the Minoans? Where did they come from? Where did they go? What spiritual legacy did they leave behind? And can this legacy help the people of today? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. With us this hour to delve into the mysterious Minoans is Laura Perry, the author of Pantheon, the Minoans. Laura is a shaman, priestess, and creator who works magic with words, paint, ink, music, textiles, and herbs. She's the founder of Ariadne's tribe, a worldwide inclusive Minoan spiritual tradition. Her website, lauraperryauthor.com. Laura, thanks so much for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Nice to have you. So your bio states you're a shaman. Where did you study?
I am a spirit worker. I practice mostly psychopomp work, and I trained with several private teachers. I'm not a member of any of the big shamanic organizations.
So would you back up a little and tell us about what is a psychopomp?
Okay, a psychopomp is the word literally means soul conductor. So it's someone who works with the spirits of the dead to help them move on to the afterlife.
And that differs from a death doula. How?
Okay, so a death doula focuses on the living side of the doorway between life and death. So a death doula helps the family and the person who is actually in the process of passing on, and helps them deal with that process. A psychopomp takes over at the moment of death, and helps the spirit of the deceased person find its way to the place where they need to be in the afterlife.
So what kind of training did you have to be able to do this?
I trained with a number of private teachers. I do not do this publicly, and I don't do it for pay. It's something that I do as a service to my family and the members of my community. I have written about it, but it is actually one of the more private aspects of what I do spiritually, because of the nature of the work.
And why is that, the nature of the work? What do you mean?
Well, because the families that I do this work for, this is a very a heartfelt and emotion-laden subject for them. Some of them, sometimes I work with the spirits of people who have been dead for a long time. And so when I began, people started asking me not to really talk about what it was that I did for them. It was their private family matters.
Confidentiality. Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when you're working with someone that's been dead for quite some time, are you working with someone that has become a haunting spirit, or how do you run across them?
Sometimes, usually it's the family who makes some kind of comment to me about things that are going on. That a lot of people these days, even in the pagan and polytheist community, are a little uncomfortable with the idea of ghosts. But yeah, if you have stuff like that going on with a spirit of a family member or someone who lived in the house before you or something like that, then a spirit worker who does psychopomp work can come in and connect with that spirit and help them work through whatever reason has kept them here so that they can move on.
So I take it you do this with permission of the spirit, and if the spirit says, "I want to stay here, leave me alone," that's what you do?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really have no human really has uh, any say in what the spirit actually does. There's a sense in which I'm a therapist for the dead, um, just helping them figure out what has gotten them stuck, and and how what would be best for all concerned, living and dead. So,
Sounds like it's fairly complicated. How long did you study before you could do this?
uh, about 10 years before I could just go off on my own. And yeah.
Yes,
Uh,
sounds like pretty in depth. So your bio also states that you're a priestess. Tell us a little bit
yes.
about that.
So I am actually a third degree Wiccan priestess in an eclectic tradition. Um, but the main thing that I do these days is I am the founder and temple mom of Ariadne's tribe, which is a worldwide inclusive Minoan spiritual tradition, a polytheist and animist tradition. And so I serve as a priestess in that tradition when I lead rituals at workshops and conferences.
So what dictates being a priestess?
It's a function more than anything. It is a role. Now, in some traditions, like in Wicca, it's a title that's bestowed when you reach a certain degree. Um, but from a practical perspective, it's a function. A priestess is a woman who runs rituals, who leads rituals in which other people participate and helps them connect with the divine.
Okay, so when you're working with these rituals, are they all ancient rituals? Are they appropriated from different tribal communities, or do you create the rituals based on principles?
No, in Ariadne's tribe, we are a revivalist tradition. Um, the Minoans were a Bronze Age culture, and they no longer exist. So there is no living culture to appropriate from. Um, we have uh, we have researched to the best of our ability and come up with modern uh, representations of the ideas that we think the Minoans were trying to get across in their religion, and um, and then we perform that in our rituals.
That's sounds pretty challenging, really. If
Yeah.
you know having to dig around and find what their
Yes.
traditions were. Did they have a written language?
They did, but we can't read it.
Oh,
Uh,
really? I mean,
yeah,
we
yeah.
kind of make out Egyptian. We can't make out Minoan.
No, we can read Egyptian because some very lucky person found the Rosetta Stone, which gave us Egyptian and Greek, uh, the same thing written in the two different languages, and so people were able to translate it. The Minoans wrote a script called Linear A, um, and we have a number of those texts, but we have no way of translating it because there are not enough texts to use standard decipherment techniques. And no one has been able to match it to any known language. So
That's
they were a literate society, but we can't read what they wrote.
They were literate, but we aren't necessarily, right?
Right, right.
So, how'd you become interested in the Minoans if they're so remote? I mean, it's like,
Yeah, actually, it was a complete freak of fate. In a high school art history class, I happened to flip the book open to this big color plate of the famous bull leaping fresco from Knossos, and I just got goosebumps head to toe. And that was my connection. That a doorway opened then, and in all the years since then, I have been sort of mildly obsessed, I guess you could say.
so who was this? The picture that you saw, what was it?
Okay, so the Minoans made these big wall paintings, and archaeologists have found a number of them. They're mostly fragmentary, but they've been able to piece them back together. They made the very colorful wall paintings. And the one that I'm talking about is called the Bull Leaper fresco, or sometimes it's called the Toreador fresco. And it is a picture of a big brown and white spotted bull with 3 people doing acrobatics over it, grabbing hold of its horns, leaping over its back, somersaulting, and landing behind it.
The first circus.
Maybe.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty amazing. And how old is that painting? Do they have any idea?
That one dates to 1450 BCE.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So,
And where were they? Where were the Minoans? Where were these
okay.
artifacts found?
Okay. So the Minoans lived on the island of Crete in the Mediterranean. It's just south of the modern nation of Greece. It's the biggest island in the Mediterranean. So.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. So, were they kind of isolated on this island? Is it, or were they able to travel back and forth?
Oh, they were a big sailing culture.
Ah,
They had an enormous sailing fleet, ports all around the island. They sailed all over the Mediterranean and traded with the Egyptians, the Canaanites, the people up in Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, the people in Greece. So yeah, they were busy.
well, it's time for us to take a station break. Laura and I will return very shortly, so don't you go away. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. Who came first, the Egyptians or the Minoans? With us this hour discussing the ancient Minoans is Laura Perry, the author of Pantheon, the Minoans. Laura, there's a question. Who came first, the Egyptians or the Minoans? You said they traded.
They did, and actually, the 2 cultures are about the same age. The Minoans, their ancestors came from Anatolia, modern day Turkey, migrated down to Crete around maybe 10,000 or 9,000 BCE, and settled there. And they built farms and then villages and then towns and cities. Until by about the year 3000 BCE, they were what we think of as the Minoans, with the art and the culture. And the Egyptians, in place in ancient Egypt, grew up along about the same timelines, from early Neolithic cultures to the more advanced culture that we think of as ancient Egypt.
It's pretty fascinating I looked when I was going to have you on the show. Of course, I looked up Minoans, and their wall paintings are pretty similar to the Egyptians, really, aren't they?
They are and they aren't. They did use a similar color palette. In fact, that bright blue that you see in a lot of the Minoan wall paintings is called Egyptian blue. It is the first synthetic pigment, first human-made pigment. And the Minoans bought it from the Egyptians because it was an Egyptian secret recipe that they wouldn't give away to anyone. Yeah, Egyptian art and Minoan art are both very colorful. And a lot of those colors have survived. So, we can see that. But Egyptian art is a little bit more stiff and formalized. And Minoan art tends to be a little more naturalistic, a little more flowing. There's more movement in it.
So they mostly painted on walls, or did they do pottery and other things?
Yeah, well, I think they're most famous for the wall paintings because those are the most sort of fantastic kinds of artifacts that we get from the Minoans. But yeah, they were very skilled potters. So we get all kinds of vessels, from little cups to giant pithoses that are literally big enough to put an entire human being in. And they painted beautiful designs on those as well.
From the paintings, it looks like their clothing was fairly advanced too. Very colorful, a lot of textiles.
Yeah, they actually they were a wealthy culture, and one of the ways they made that money was by selling, especially woolens, dyed woolens that they they shipped all around the Mediterranean. But yeah, they apparently had very intricately woven designs, colorful designs on their clothes. It was definitely not. We're often given an image of the ancient world that's sort of beige, that's like everything is like plain white. No, the Minoan world was very colorful, both the people and the art and the buildings.
So, what was their religion exactly?
Well, like everybody else in the Bronze Age, they were polytheists. That means they had a number of different deities, gods and goddesses that they worshipped.
Though they had a number of different ones they worshipped, did they also have one that they figured was kind of like the overlording, like uh, the Great Spirit in the Native American tradition versus the Spirit of the Wind?
There does not seem to be anything like that. Many of the Bronze Age cultures had multiple different sort of leader deities or prominent deities, rather than a single head sort of king type deity. The single head of the Pantheon style comes in with the Indo-Europeans who migrated into Europe somewhat later. So yeah, we're not entirely certain exactly what their pantheon was structured like, but our interpretation, as best as we can tell, is that a cluster of mother goddesses were sort of the top tier, in the same way that in a human family, your grandmothers are kind of the matriarchs of the family.
So, was it a matriarchal society?
There's a lot of argument about that. The fact is, there's very little evidence that it was not a matriarchal society. Because we can't read what they wrote, we can't say absolutely and for certain. But all of the cultural markers are there for a matriarchal or matrilineal society, one that traces descent through the mother rather than the father.
And the leaders, was there any way to tell, if there were female leaders or male leaders or a mix?
Oh yeah, well, the representation of men and women in Minoan art is remarkably egalitarian. We see a lot of female figures, priestesses or goddesses, in Minoan art, and I think people have maybe gotten an inaccurate representation from that. I don't know if you're familiar with the Smurfette principle.
No, I'm not.
Okay. So in the modern world, in the modern Western world especially, women are substantially underrepresented in most public spheres. And so having just one or two women is often, in a large group of men, is often considered to be adequate representation. And the stereotypical example of that is the Smurfs, who are cartoon characters, and they're all male except for one Smurfette, one female character. And
So,
so we've come to think of this as normal.
mm-hmm. Right.
And so when this has actually been studied scientifically, when a person is shown a picture of a crowd of people that is exactly half female and half male, they will estimate that there are more women than men, because we are so used to seeing it the other way around.
And so, how was the Minoan art? Was it?
Well, I actually went in and counted, because I didn't trust my own intuition because of the Smurfette principle. I actually went in and counted all the known examples of Minoan art, from the big wall paintings to tiny seals. And I found an almost exactly 50-50 representation of men and women.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, were they the first civilization of Europe?
Maybe. They are often represented that way. I think it depends on what you call civilization, because obviously there were people in Europe going back into the Stone Age. The Minoans were definitely what we call a high civilization. They had paved roads. They had aqueducts. Centuries before the Romans, they had aqueducts to bring water from local springs. They had water piped into their cities. They had manual flush toilets and sewers. Yeah, so they were definitely what we consider a high civilization. They had big cities with temples, sometimes called palaces, as the centerpieces, and harbors, an extensive sailing, trading fleet. So definitely civilized.
It's pretty interesting. Do they have the sciences as well, I take it?
Well, we assume they did. Again, we can't read what they wrote, but they must have, because they had these extensive public works. And
Had to
so
have figured
they're
it out somehow, right?
right.
Yeah. Okay. So, were they also fishermen? Did they have a lot of, because you're talking about all the sailing that they did and
Yes.
where they were located, I would assume they were a fishing society as well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And there were the big port cities along the coast where the big ships, the trading ships, came and went. But there were also smaller fishing boats. We have art showing a couple of young men who have caught big strings of mahi fish. The representation of animals in Minoan art is often so accurate that we can identify the exact species,
Oh
which
my!
is,
So they were
yeah,
they were quite the artisans, then I take it.
yes, yes.
Mm, pretty amazing. So, where did they originate? You said they came from where?
Anatolia, modern day Turkey.
Okay.
Um, the DNA research has been done that shows that their ancestors. So in the Neolithic, 10,000, 9,000 BCE, people discovered agriculture, and that sparked a whole bunch of migrations. As population expanded, people went looking for new places to farm. So there were a number of waves of migration out of Anatolia and into Europe and the Mediterranean. And so the Minoans' ancestors came down to Crete in one of those waves.
Oh, interesting. And how was Crete as far as farmland and everything went? Was it pretty rich?
Yeah, and it still is, actually. It's a fairly large island. It has a small mountain range going down the middle of it, sort of its spine, and then some extensive lowlands ringing that a lot of big plains with rivers running through them. It's excellent farming country. It still is. Vineyards and olive groves everywhere.
Oh, so they were dealing with vineyards as well.
Hmm.
Olive oil, all the things you see in the
Yep.
Mediterranean.
Yep.
Fascinating. Well, it's again time for us to take another station break. Laura and I will be right back to continue our discussion. So please stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. What did the Minoans know? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing the gifts of the Minoans is Laura Perry. Her website, lauraperryauthor.com. Laura, these people that existed so long ago, you were fascinated by them and have been studying them for how long?
I guess since about 1980.
So it's stuck with you.
Yes.
What is it what kind of knowledge did they carry that keeps you engaged?
I think more than anything, it was their worldview. Um, when I first learned about them, it was a revelation that there was a culture that was so egalitarian, so connected with nature while still being what we call civilized. They seem to have found a balance between technology and spirituality that I really admire.
So here's the $64 question. If they were so balanced and everything, where are they? What happened to them?
Um, Bad things happen to them. Okay, so when the Minoans were first rediscovered at the beginning of the 20th century, people thought that the eruption of Thera the modern island of Santorini in the Mediterranean. It's a giant caldera, the volcano. They thought that eruption had destroyed the Minoans. And that made sense, given what we knew at the time. Fast forward 100 years later, and science has shown that that eruption happened a couple hundred years earlier than we thought. And while the Minoans and all the other people around the Eastern Mediterranean were certainly seriously damaged by the eruption itself, the tsunami, the ash cloud, all of that, the Minoans did manage to recover and rebuild afterwards. But they were weakened. They were struggling. And by that time, the Indo-Europeans had moved into Europe, and the ones in Greece had developed a civilization that we call Mycenaean. And so the Mycenaeans had been trading partners with the Minoans for some time before the eruption. And after the eruption, the Mycenaeans, one way or another, we're not sure exactly how, but they appear to have taken over at Knossos, which was the biggest city on Crete, the biggest Minoan city. They appear to have taken over there and attempted to take over the rest of the island. And once again, because we don't have anything that the Minoans wrote to guide us in this, we're having to base this picture on archaeology, what's available in a form that can be dug up and looked at. But it appears that when the Mycenaeans were unable to take over the rest of the island, they attacked and looted and burned the Minoan cities around the year 1450 BCE. And that was the end of Minoan civilization as we know it. There were still people on the island, but the big cities and all of the flashy stuff was gone.
Is there any clue as to what prompted these people to take over the Minoans once they've been trade partners and everything?
Well, the Minoans were wealthy.
That'll do it.
Yeah. They were also oddly peaceful. They didn't have a military that anyone has been able to find. Every now and then, someone will publish a paper insisting, based on some really faint circumstantial evidence, that the Minoans must have had a military, because everyone has a military, right? But there's no actual hard evidence of any sort that they had a military. They appear to have put all of their resources into trading. They were an island. They didn't have any borders to haggle over with anybody else. And they apparently, were able to trade with everybody, on all sides around them, and not siphoning off any of their profits into a military allowed them to turn that back into their own economy, and they became fabulously wealthy.
Well, there's a lesson that can be learned right there. Yes.
Yeah.
So, where have we've gotten the information from digs and from books, but we can't read them. Is there any place else that you're getting information on the Minoans, what they were like, where they went, what happened?
Sure. And it's an interesting set of puzzle pieces. So we have the ruins of the buildings, not just the paintings and the pottery and all of that, but the ruins of their buildings. And there is a fabulous team at Uppsala University that has studied the archaeoastronomy of these buildings, the astronomical alignments. And so we can actually reconstruct the Minoan sacred calendar based on the points in the sky that their temples and their cave shrines and mountain peak sanctuaries and other buildings are aligned to.
So they worked with sacred geometry, they worked with the ley lines of the earth, that sort of thing?
Yeah, and with celestial objects, with the rising and setting of the planets, the moon, the sun, the certain stars. Yeah, I've always imagined the Minoan priesthood standing up on the temple roofs at night, studying the stars and marking down, the times in their sacred calendar.
That was
Uh,
long before we had telescopes, yes?
yes, but it was
So
also long before we had light pollution.
you could say they could actually see up there, right? Yeah, pretty fascinating. And were some of the rituals designed around these alignments?
Yes, it's pretty clear that the some of the events at the temples and the cave shrines and the peak sanctuaries were organized around the dates that these celestial objects rose and set, especially over mountaintops, mountain peaks, because they can be sighted, along the horizon. Um, we also think that the sacred horns, most people have seen the sort of stylized double horns that appear in Minoan art. Um,
Double horns
the
as in goes on the head or that you blow?
they look like stylized animal horns.
Okay. Mhm.
They're shaped kind of like a U, like a
Mhm.
letter U, and these were mounted in rows along the rooftops of the temple buildings. We have artwork that shows this. The temple roofs were flat, like a lot of the roofs around the Mediterranean still are. And so it is thought that the Minoan astronomers stood on the roofs and sighted the rising and setting of the moon, the sun, the stars, the planets between the horns along
So
the
kind of
edges of the
sight
roof.
sight them in.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, the celestial bodies are relative to us in a quite a different position now, aren't they, than what they were
Yeah.
during the era of the Minoans? So, how can we tell? Do we have to kind of reverse engineer to figure out what they were looking at and what they lined up with?
Yes. Yes, we do. Thankfully, there is software that helps to do that these days. But yeah, due to a phenomenon called precession,
Mhm.
the whole background of the stars shifts just a little bit, almost imperceptibly year to year, but over long periods of time, centuries and millennia, it shifts substantially. So yeah, the people who study this kind of thing do have to do some pretty extensive calculations to see exactly when the various celestial objects rose and set during the Minoan era.
Did they align some of their beliefs about the gods and goddesses and their with the celestial bodies that they were working with?
We think so. Um, the A number of the planets and the stars and the moon and the sun obviously still have we still have remnants of those connections in the fragments of Minoan myth that survived. That's one of the other sources of information we have about them is that of course back then a lot of this was oral tradition, just stories that people passed on, and they were some of the stories were lost or garbled over time, but fragments of them survived and were written down centuries later by Greek writers. And so we have little bits and pieces of that. Um,
And it's interesting that we have to use computer programs now to figure out what they were looking at then. When they were just coming at it from looking with the naked eye and figuring
right.
out. Yeah, it's just pretty fascinating to me. So, um, when they did their paintings, were there also representations of these holy places, or why the alignment was there, or were um, that sort of thing? Was there any paintings that indicated the use there?
We have yeah, on a number of the frescoes, and more especially on seals. The Minoans used stone and metal seals the same way, like in the Middle Ages, people would press a seal into wax
Hmm. Hmm.
to seal a letter. The Minoans used carved and molded metal seals as a sort of ID and there are thousands of them.
Amazing.
And some of the larger ones, the metal rings, gold and bronze rings, have very detailed depictions of rituals on them.
Well, we're going
So,
to have to take another station break. Please stay with us. Laura and I will continue to explore the evolutionary wisdom of the Minoans. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. What value does ancient Minoan teachings hold for people of today? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Laura Perry. Her website, lauraperryauthor.com. So this brings us to, okay, this has all been very interesting, but what have you found and what have people found that the Minoans did or had or knew that can help us through these times we're facing today?
I think the most important thing they have to offer is a different worldview. Um, there's that saying that's been attributed to I don't know how many different people, that you can't solve a problem from the same level that it was created at. Um, and so I think we need to change our mindset and our worldview in order to be able to see and find solutions to current problems. So the Minoans were a highly civilized society, something that we admire. They had technology, they had wealth. They were not a Stone Age tribe, just scraping by to survive, but they managed to organize their culture in a way that created gender equality, that created a peaceful society, um, and that maintained their connection with nature and with each other and with the web of being. And so my idea is if we've done it before, we can do it again.
They seem to be surprisingly peaceful and yet very inclusive with all their trading. Do you think that we can actually emulate that today?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I think we have the potential for it. Um, I think it's a matter of finding the will. Change is always scary. But knowing that we have now, let me add in here: the Minoans were not a utopia. Okay, it was not a perfect society. They were flawed human beings, and they still managed for centuries to have a culture where no one went hungry. Research on human remains from Minoan grave sites shows that even the poorest people were well nourished. They shared food. They made sure that everyone was taken care of. So I think it's a matter of deciding where our priorities lay, because they made a choice about their priorities, what their resources were going to go to.
Wasn't that choice made possible because of their isolation? They didn't have borders to protect.
They were certainly lucky in that regard, but they did also expand to a bunch of other islands. There were Minoan colonies on Akrotiri, on Thera, the city of Akrotiri, on the island of Thera, on the island of Milos. So they did expand. Archaeologists think that there was probably a Minoan quarter in every major port city around the Eastern Mediterranean. So they were not isolationist at all.
Interesting. So how long were they? What was their lifespan, if you will? How long were they on the planet?
Um, from the time that they first settled Crete, let's use a conservative estimate of 9,000 BCE, until all the major cities were destroyed in about 1450 BCE. So that's 7,500 years.
Wow, that's a pretty successful society there, isn't it?
Yeah.
How large a part did religion play in their society? Could it be told from the ruins, and how many were temples and how many were sacred sites? Was everyone? Did it seem that everyone was fairly involved in their religion?
Yeah, I think it was central to their culture. Um, the all the major cities had a big temple at the center, but there were also nature-based cave shrines in the mountains and then peak sanctuaries on the mountaintops. There were smaller sacred houses all over the place, something similar to what we might think of in, say, a medieval monastery. And ordinary people had altars and shrines in their homes. It's not as flashy as the big buildings with the paintings and everything, but private homes have been excavated, and so it seems like the religion played a central role in people's lives.
Wonder if that's not where the peace came from. So, Laura, it's about time in the show, and I get to ask you, what's your mission?
My mission is to help humanity remember its heart.
Do you feel that the Minoans were really connected with their hearts?
I do. I do. Their whole culture, the liveliness of it, the centrality of the sharing and the giving and the equality. To me, it feels like they were living from their hearts.
And that seems like something's kind of gone by the wayside in our society, don't you think?
Yeah.
So, what was unique about their religion?
Well, for one thing, it appears to have focused on mother figures, mother goddesses. There is extensive breast and udder imagery in Minoan art, enough to make a lot of modern people very uncomfortable. But it's not there to be racy. It's there to remind, to be a reminder of the nurturing and nourishing aspects of the concept of mother. And so, if you have mother goddesses who are caring for their children and nurturing and nourishing them, and that is your framework for how to build a society, then everyone is going to be working from that mindset that we need to take care of each other.
That's sounds like a nice solid way to be. What trance and aesthetic states were used in the Minoan rituals?
We have a number of figurines that show several different ones. There is a famous pose called the Minoan salute that involves holding a loose fist up to your forehead with the back of your hand. And that appears to be a worship pose, a pose of respect. It's shown people making that pose toward deities, toward natural features like mountains or the sun. And there's another one with the arms raised up in the position that you see the snake goddess holding her snakes up in, but without snakes. It's called upraised arms, and this is a trance ecstatic posture that the priestesses appear to have used, perhaps when being trance possessed by a goddess in ritual.
Oh, interesting. So, what can Minoan spirituality teach us about the possibilities for spiritual growth and evolution today?
I think Minoan spirituality gives us a blueprint for how to make connection, how to connect with each other, with the world around us, with nature and the cosmos, not as not in any sort of hierarchical or dominator or conquering kind of way, but in a way that recognizes that we are equal parts of this tapestry, or we're woven into it along with everyone and everything else.
How do you see that changing us today if we could take more of that on, if you will?
Well, it would certainly change people's priorities. We have in the modern West such an individualized, everyone is an island kind of culture, kind of mindset, that to the extent that many of us don't even know our neighbors anymore. And so the idea that we are part of community, not just the human community around us, but the community of all being. Um, to me, that would push me toward connecting, making active connections with other people, with nature and environmental issues, with changing our priorities, to make sure that we are paying attention to every thread that we pull on that connects us to everything around us.
I can see where it would be helpful to realize that every action you take has an impact on everything around you.
Yeah.
So, what does the wisdom of the Minoans have to offer people of today? And what's your vision for the future if we take on that wisdom?
To me, the wisdom is that a dominator or hierarchical society is not necessary. Um, is absolutely not necessary. An egalitarian society is possible. It is feasible. It is something that human beings might actually be naturally set up for. And knowing this, just having the knowledge that it has been done before, opens up the possibility that that we can do it again, and that we should work at it,
Well,
rather
that's
than brushing it
unfortunate.
aside.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to stop on that note because we're actually out of time in the show. But
Oh,
Laura, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom of the Minoans with us.
thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Our guest this hour has been Laura Perry, the author of Pantheon, the Minoans. To find out more about Laura, where you can find her book and all she has to offer, visit her website, lauraperryauthor.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join me right here next time. This mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to an evolving world.